Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science slows down and nature whispers you to sleep. Take time to find a comfortable position as you let the outside world fade away. Let it recede as you bring your attention to the present moment. Settle in, relax, and let's begin. Let your eyes close for a moment, and let the day you've just come from settle quietly behind you. Picture the open surface of a warm sea, just as the last light of evening softens into a deep, endless blue. The water is calm here, barely stirred by any wind at all, and beneath that calm surface, suspended in the slow current, something pale and translucent pulses gently forward, rising and falling with each soft contraction of its own body. This is a moon jellyfish, one of the most widespread and easily recognized of all the creatures we'll spend this next 2 hours quietly drifting alongside tonight. Not to explain her away, or reduce her to some list of curiosities, but simply to move at her own unhurried pace for a while, through open water, through darkness, and eventually back into morning light again. Look closely, if you can picture her clearly, and you'll notice 4 faint, horseshoe-shaped markings glowing softly through the translucent surface of her bell, her reproductive organs, visible right through her own nearly transparent body the way you might glimpse the shape of a hand held behind a thin paper lantern. It's one of the small, distinctive details that make this particular species so easy to recognize, wherever in the world you might happen to encounter her, drifting through harbors and open coastline on nearly every continent except Antarctica. There is nowhere else either of us needs to be right now. Let your breathing slow, matching itself loosely to the same gentle rhythm pulsing through her almost transparent body. Open, close, open, close, a motion so old it was already ancient before almost anything else alive today had even begun to take shape. Jellyfish, in form or another, have existed on this planet for an extraordinarily long stretch of time, longer, in fact, than nearly any other animal group we could possibly compare them to. Fossil evidence suggests jellyfish-like creatures were already drifting through ancient seas more than 500 million years ago, long before fish first developed bones, long before the very first plant took root on dry land, long before anything resembling a dinosaur, or a bird, or a mammal, had even begun to exist. While mountains have risen and eroded away again, while entire oceans have opened and closed, this same simple, elegant design, a soft, pulsing body drifting through open water, has continued quietly working, almost unchanged, for a span of time that's genuinely difficult to hold in the mind all at once. Consider, for just a moment, everything that has happened on this planet since that same basic body plan first appeared. Every mountain range you've ever seen in a photograph, every ice age, every mass extinction that has ever swept across the planet's surface, all of it unfolded after jellyfish, or something remarkably similar to them, were already quietly pulsing through the world's oceans. Almost nothing else alive today can make that same claim with quite so much confidence. And it truly is a remarkably simple design, at its core. This moon jellyfish drifting past us now has no brain at all, no heart, no blood, no bones of any kind. Her entire body is close to 95% water, held together by a thin, elegant network of nerve cells spread evenly through her tissue rather than gathered into any single control center. Instead of one command post directing everything, her whole body reacts and coordinates itself collectively, sensation and response rippling outward together, the way a calm pond ripples evenly outward from wherever a single stone happens to land. That same high water content explains a great deal about how she experiences the ocean around her too. Unlike a fish or a mammal, constantly working to hold its own shape against gravity's steady pull, our moon jellyfish exists in a kind of quiet equilibrium with the surrounding water, her own body's density so close to that of seawater itself that she neither sinks rapidly nor floats stubbornly to the surface, drifting instead in a gentle, suspended balance that costs her remarkably little energy to maintain hour after hour, night after night. She is not, technically speaking, a fish at all, despite the name so many of us grew up using without a second thought. She belongs instead to a much older group of animals called cnidarians, a family that also includes corals and sea anemones, animals built around this same basic, radiating body plan, and this same reliance on stinging cells rather than teeth or claws for catching a meal. That word, cnidarian, comes from an ancient Greek word for stinging nettle, chosen precisely because of the same stinging cells lining nearly every member of this family, whether it happens to be a jellyfish drifting freely through open water, a coral polyp cemented permanently in place on a reef, or a sea anemone waiting patiently for a small fish to wander too close to its own waving tentacles. Despite looking, at a glance, like three entirely different kinds of animals, all three share the same basic underlying toolkit, refined across millions of years into three quite different ways of making a living in the ocean. Watch her move now, slowly pulsing her soft, umbrella-shaped bell open and closed, drawing water in and pushing it back out again in a simple, elegant form of jet propulsion. A ring of muscle running around the edge of her bell contracts rhythmically, squeezing water out from underneath her, propelling her gently forward, or more often, simply upward, since so much of a jellyfish daily movement is really just about staying suspended at the right depth, letting the wider ocean current carry her the rest of the way. That single ring of muscle, called the coronal muscle, is essentially the only significant muscle tissue she carries anywhere in her entire body, and yet it's remarkably efficient for what little energy it costs her to operate. Compared to a fish of similar size, constantly working fins and a flexible spine simply to hold its position in open water, a jellyfish's pulsing bell uses only a small fraction of the energy, most of her actual movement handled instead by patiently drifting with whatever current happens to be available, saving her own limited energy reserves for the occasional adjustment in depth rather than any sustained, continuous effort. Trailing down from the edge of that same pulsing bell, dozens of fine, delicate tentacles drift loosely through the water around her, each one lined with thousands upon thousands of microscopic stinging cells called nematocysts. Each nematocyst functions almost like a tiny, coiled harpoon, sealed shut until the precise moment something brushes against a sensitive trigger hair on its surface. The instant that happens, the cell fires an impossibly fine, barbed thread outward, faster than nearly any other biological process yet studied, injecting a small dose of venom into whatever brushed against it, whether that happens to be a small drifting shrimp, or, if you were swimming nearby yourself, your own bare skin. Every one of these tiny stinging cells is entirely single-use, spent the moment it fires, meaning a jellyfish must constantly manufacture fresh replacements throughout its life, a quiet, continuous investment of energy simply to keep its own primary means of both hunting and self-defense fully stocked and ready at all times. A single tentacle may carry many thousands of these cells packed closely together, and a large jellyfish may carry many millions across its entire body, an entire arsenal built one microscopic cell at a time. Here's something worth remembering, gently, before we drift any further into the night. Even a jellyfish washed up on shore, seemingly lifeless, its body already drying in the sun, can often still sting. Those same tiny, coiled cells remain loaded and ready for some time even after the rest of the animal has died, a small, quiet reminder that this particular creature's entire survival strategy was built around a defense so automatic, so distributed throughout its own body, that it doesn't actually require a working brain, or even a beating heart, to keep functioning at all. Let the moon jellyfish continue her slow, unhurried drift through darkening water for now, and let's look a little more closely at exactly how a creature with no brain at all still manages to sense the world around her so effectively. Around the delicate edge of her bell, spaced evenly like small beads along a necklace, sit a series of specialized sensory structures called raphelia. Each one carries, tucked inside it, a tiny fluid-filled chamber called a statocyst, containing a small granule of mineral that shifts gently with gravity, not unlike the way a carpenter's level uses a bubble of air to indicate which way is truly level. Through this simple, elegant structure, our moon jellyfish always knows, with quiet certainty, which way is up, allowing her to orient herself correctly even in the pitch darkness of open, moonless water. Alongside that same balance-sensing structure, many Rapalia also carry a simple, light-sensitive patch of cells called an ocellus, capable of little more than distinguishing brighter water from darker water, enough to help our moon jellyfish stay at roughly the right depth, rising gently toward brighter water during the day and sinking back down again as darkness falls each evening. An entire simplified rhythm of daily movement guided by nothing more elaborate than this same small, unassuming patch of light-sensitive tissue. Some of her more elaborate relatives take this same basic sensory toolkit considerably further. Certain box jellyfish, a group we'll meet a little more closely later tonight, carry as many as 24 separate eyes clustered into small groups around their bell, some of them remarkably sophisticated, complete with a lens and a retina not unlike our own, capable of forming genuine images rather than simply detecting light and dark. And yet, even with that unusually advanced eyesight, these same animals still have no centralized brain to interpret what those eyes are actually seeing. Instead, their distributed nerve net somehow manages to process that visual information well enough to navigate around obstacles, a puzzle researchers are still working patiently to fully understand. Those same 24 eyes are typically arranged in 4 separate clusters called Rapalia, each cluster containing a mix of simple light-sensing spots alongside 2 more sophisticated, image-forming eyes, one pointing upward toward the surface and one pointing downward toward the seafloor. Researchers studying this unusual arrangement have found that certain box jellyfish use their upward-facing eyes specifically to navigate around obstacles like mangrove roots, effectively watching the canopy above the water's surface to judge their own position relative to the shore, a remarkably sophisticated piece of navigation for an animal with no brain at all to consciously interpret what it's actually looking at. Deep beneath the surface of our own moon jellyfish's simple, translucent body, an entirely separate story is quietly waiting to unfold, one that stretches back to the very beginning of her own life. Before we follow that story back to its beginning, it's worth pausing on just how her nerve net actually coordinates the graceful, rhythmic pulsing we've been watching all this time. Rather than a single command center issuing instructions the way a brain would, specialized pacemaker cells scattered around her Rapalia generate a steady, rhythmic electrical signal entirely on their own, spreading outward through her simple nerve net and triggering her coronal muscle to contract in that same smooth, wave-like pulse. It's a bit like a whole room full of people clapping in unison without any single conductor, each one simply following the rhythm set by whichever nearby clap happens to reach them first, and somehow, out of that simple, decentralized coordination, an entire elegant, unified rhythm emerges. Every jellyfish begins, in fact, as something almost entirely unrecognizable compared to the graceful, pulsing shape drifting past us now. A mature medusa, the technical name for this familiar, umbrella-shaped adult form, releases eggs and sperm into the surrounding water, where fertilization produces a tiny, free-swimming larva called a planula, covered in fine, hair-like cilia that help it drift and swim through open water for a short while. Eventually, that same tiny planula settles onto a hard surface somewhere below, a rock, a piling, the underside of a drifting log, and transforms into something that looks far more like a small sea anemone than anything we'd recognize as a jellyfish at all. This stage, called a polyp, spends its days anchored firmly in place, tentacles reaching upward to catch tiny drifting plankton, patiently building up energy reserves for what comes next. When conditions finally turn favorable, warming water, the right balance of nutrients, sometimes simply the passage of enough time, that same anchored polyp begins a genuinely strange and remarkable transformation called strobylation. Its body starts pinching itself into a stack of thin, disc-shaped segments, each one still attached faintly to the one below it, not unlike a stack of dinner plates balanced carefully atop one another. One by one, from the top down, each disc breaks free and swims away as a tiny, immature jellyfish called an ephira, which will spend the following weeks slowly growing into the familiar, pulsing Medusa shape we've been quietly following through open water tonight. A single polyp can produce a surprising number of these tiny ephirae from just one strobylation event, an entire small generation released gradually over the course of days or weeks, each one drifting off independently into open water to begin its own separate journey toward adulthood. It's a strategy that trades the certainty of careful, individual parental care, something jellyfish never provide at all, for the sheer statistical advantage of sending many small, independent lives out into the world at once, trusting that at least some reasonable fraction will manage to survive long enough to reach their own full, pulsing adult size. Remarkably, that same original polyp, having released its whole stack of tiny jellyfish, doesn't simply disappear afterward. It often remains anchored in place, quietly rebuilding itself, ready to repeat this entire strange, patient process again the following season, sometimes for years, occasionally for decades, waiting through long stretches of otherwise unremarkable time for the right conditions to finally arrive once more. Some time has now passed since we first found our moon jellyfish pulsing gently through the darkening water above us, entirely unaware of the intricate, patient history written into her own body's simple, elegant design. Let's continue drifting alongside her a little longer, and see what else this long, quiet night still has to show us. Let the moon jellyfish continue her own slow journey below the surface for now, while we drift instead toward open water, further from shore, where the wind has picked up just slightly, enough to ripple the surface into small, scattered waves. There's a particular quality to open water at this distance from shore, no coastline visible in any direction, only the gentle, repeating rhythm of small waves catching what little light remains in the sky. Sound carries differently out here too, softer somehow, swallowed quickly by the enormous surrounding quiet of open ocean stretching away in every direction. Here, riding right along that rippled surface, something else entirely comes into view, a pale, bluish, balloon-like shape floating half above and half below the waterline, trailing long, delicate tentacles down into the water beneath it. Most people would call this a jellyfish too, at a glance, and it's easy enough to understand why. But the Portuguese man-o'-war is something considerably stranger than any true jellyfish we've met so far tonight. Its name itself carries an old piece of history, given by 18th century sailors who thought the creature's inflated float, catching the wind and riding along the surface, resembled the sails of a Portuguese warship of that same era. That same nautical impression has stuck ever since, even though the animal itself has, of course, no connection whatsoever to any actual ship beyond that one passing visual resemblance noticed centuries ago by sailors watching it drift past their own vessels. It isn't a single animal at all. It's an entire colony made up of many smaller, specialized individual organisms called zooids, each one genetically identical to the others, yet each one built for an entirely different job, working together so seamlessly that the whole colony behaves, to any observer, exactly like one single, unified creature. One zooid forms that same gas-filled float we can see riding along the surface, called a pneumatophore, catching the wind gently like a small, translucent sail, and steering the entire colony across the surface of the ocean. Other zooids specialize purely in catching prey, others in digestion, and still others exist purely for reproduction, an entire division of labor built into one drifting, floating community. It's worth sitting with that idea for a moment, since it genuinely challenges what we usually mean by the word individual. None of these specialized zooids could survive apart from the others for very long, each one entirely dependent on the rest of the colony to handle whatever job it isn't itself equipped to do. And yet the colony as a whole behaves with a coordination and apparent purpose that looks, from any reasonable distance, exactly like the behavior of one single, unified animal, riding the wind, trailing its tentacles, responding to prey, all without any single body actually existing to direct any of it. Those same trailing tentacles, built by yet another specialized type of zooid entirely, can stretch down remarkably far beneath the surface, sometimes 10 meters or more, occasionally reported considerably longer still, each one armed with the same kind of stinging nematocysts we discussed with our moon jellyfish earlier, though considerably more potent in this particular case. A sting from a Portuguese man-o-war can be intensely painful, and just like true jellyfish, a detached tentacle washed up on a beach can often still deliver a sting for some time even after the rest of the colony has died. Remarkably, at least one sea creature has evolved a genuine tolerance for this same potent venom. Certain sea slugs, drifting along the surface in search of exactly this kind of prey, feed directly on Portuguese man-o-war colonies, somehow managing to consume and even repurpose the stinging cells for their own defense afterward, storing them undischarged within their own tissue and redeploying them later against any predator foolish enough to attempt eating the slug in turn. It's a genuinely remarkable example of one animal turning its prey's own weapon into a borrowed defense entirely its own. Let's drift a little further out now, past the reach of that trailing colony, into deeper, quieter water, where an entirely different and considerably gentler creature moves through the darkness, one that isn't a jellyfish at all either, despite how easily its soft, glowing body might be mistaken for one at first glance. This is a comb jelly, a member of an entirely separate branch of the animal family tree called ctenophores. Rather than pulsing a bell-shaped body the way our moon jellyfish does, a comb jelly moves instead by beating 8 delicate rows of fused cilia running the length of its body, tiny hair-like structures working together in a smooth, rippling wave, refracting the last traces of available light into small, shifting rainbows as they move, an effect that has nothing at all to do with actual bioluminescence. Simply light bending gently through countless tiny, synchronized movements. Watching those comb rows in motion, even briefly, tends to leave a genuinely lasting impression, an effect closer to watching light play across the surface of a soap bubble than anything most people associate with ordinary marine life. Each individual row beats in a coordinated wave passing from one end of the comb jelly's body to the other, a rippling motion of such fine, mechanical precision that researchers studying animal locomotion have spent considerable time simply trying to understand exactly how so many tiny, hair-like structures manage to coordinate so smoothly without anything resembling a centralized nervous system directing the effort. Many comb jellies do also produce their own genuine bioluminescent glow as well, particularly when disturbed, flashing soft blue-green light through the dark water, likely intended to startle a potential predator or attract the attention of something further up the food chain that might, in turn, chase away whatever was threatening the comb jelly in the first place. And rather than relying on stinging cells at all, most comb jellies capture their prey using an entirely different tool, specialized sticky cells called chyloblasts, lining their tentacles like tiny dabs of natural glue, trapping small drifting plankton on contact rather than injecting any venom whatsoever. Each choloblast works through a small, coiled spiral thread anchoring it firmly to the surrounding tentacle, allowing the sticky cell itself to stretch slightly as struggling prey attempts to pull free, rather than snapping loose entirely the way a more rigid attachment might. It's a genuinely different solution to the same basic problem our moon jellyfish solves through venom and a barbed, piercing thread, one relying on gentle, elastic adhesion instead of any chemical weapon whatsoever. A reminder that evolution rarely settles on just one single answer to any given challenge, even among animals that might, at a passing glance, seem to be doing more or less the same thing. Some researchers studying the deep genetic history of animal life have suggested that comb jellies may represent one of the very earliest branches in the entire animal family tree, branching away even before sponges in some proposed versions of that ancient family tree. A genuinely unsettled and actively debated question among scientists still working to untangle exactly how the earliest multicellular life on this planet first diversified. Let's move now toward warmer, shallower water, closer to a distant, moonlit shoreline, where a considerably more dangerous relative of our moon jellyfish moves with a purpose and speed her gentler cousin never quite manages. The shift in water here feels different immediately, warmer against the skin, clearer in places where the sandy bottom lies close enough to the surface to catch the last traces of fading light. It's exactly the kind of shallow, warm coastal water this next animal favors most, patrolling quietly along sheltered beaches and estuaries where its own preferred small fish and shrimp tend to gather in similarly shallow water. This is a box jellyfish, named for the distinctly cube-shaped bell that sets it apart immediately from the rounded, dome-like shape we're used to by now. Certain species within this group, particularly the Australian box jellyfish found in warm coastal waters off northern Australia and throughout parts of Southeast Asia, carry venom potent enough to be considered among the most dangerous produced by any animal on the planet, capable, in serious cases, of causing cardiac arrest within only a few minutes of a significant sting. That venom's remarkable potency appears to have evolved specifically around the box jellyfish's unusually active hunting style. because it actively pursues fast-moving prey like small fish, rather than passively waiting for something to drift into its tentacles the way our moon jellyfish does. Its venom needed to work fast enough to immobilize a struggling meal almost instantly, before that same meal had any real chance of damaging the jellyfish's own comparatively delicate tentacles in a desperate attempt to escape. Unlike our moon jellyfish, who mostly drifts wherever the current happens to carry her, a box jellyfish is a genuinely active, purposeful swimmer, capable of reaching speeds of roughly 2 meters per second, fast enough to actively pursue small fish and shrimp rather than simply waiting for a meal to drift within reach. Combined with those same sophisticated, image-forming eyes we mentioned a little earlier, the box jellyfish behaves less like the passive drifter most people imagine when they picture a jellyfish, and considerably more like a genuine, purposeful hunter patrolling its own particular stretch of shallow coastal water. Let's move now, further north, into colder water entirely, where an altogether different kind of giant drifts slowly through the chill of a northern sea. This is a lion's mane jellyfish, widely considered the largest jellyfish species known anywhere in the world. Its bell alone can grow past 2 meters across, and its trailing tentacles, densely packed and richly colored in shades of deep red and orange, can stretch out behind it for more than 30 meters, longer, remarkably, than even the largest blue whale. Picture that comparison for a moment, since it's genuinely difficult to hold in the mind at first. An animal with no bones, no brain, and a body built almost entirely of water, trailing behind it a curtain of tentacles longer than the largest animal ever to have lived on this planet. Most of that impressive length remains invisible from the surface, coiled and drifting loosely beneath the water, occasionally spreading out further when the jellyfish is actively hunting through a rich patch of small fish or plankton. Despite that almost unbelievable length, a lion's mane's sting tends to be considerably milder than the Australian box jellyfish we just left behind, uncomfortable and painful certainly, but rarely dangerous to a healthy adult, more a matter of local irritation than any serious systemic threat. Further west, in the cold, nutrient-rich waters of the Sea of Japan, another true giant occasionally appears in overwhelming numbers. Numerous jellyfish can grow to weigh more than 200 kilograms, its enormous bell sometimes exceeding 2 meters across, and in certain years, entire blooms of these giants have appeared so densely that local fishing fleets have found their nets seriously damaged, or entirely too heavy to safely haul in, simply from the sheer collective weight of jellyfish caught up alongside whatever fish they were actually hoping to catch. Researchers studying these periodic blooms have linked their timing to a combination of factors, including warmer water temperatures and changing nutrient patterns along the coast of the Yellow Sea, where the larval and polyp stages of numerous jellyfish are believed to spend much of their early development before drifting toward Japan as they mature. Some fishing communities along that same coastline have adapted their own practices considerably in response, timing certain fishing seasons around expected bloom patterns, and developing specialized netting designed to shed jellyfish more easily while still retaining the fish those same fishing boats actually set out to catch in the first place. Rest here a while, drifting quietly between these two very different kinds of giants, one gentle and slow, trailing its enormous mane through cold northern water, the other dense and overwhelming in sheer collective numbers, a quiet reminder of just how much variation this one simple, ancient body plan has managed to produce across so many different corners of the world's oceans. Let's drift now into warm, clear water near a quiet tropical coastline, where a jellyfish smaller than a fingernail carries a secret genuinely unlike anything else we've encountered so far tonight. The water here is noticeably shallower and clearer than the open ocean we've spent so much of tonight drifting through, sunlight still faintly visible even this deep into the evening, filtering down through water calm enough to see clearly all the way to a sandy, gently sloping bottom below. It's the kind of sheltered, undisturbed coastal water where this next tiny, easily overlooked animal tends to be found, clinging quietly to rocks and pilings where few people ever think to look closely enough to notice it at all. This tiny animal, barely visible unless you know exactly where to look, is called Turritopsis dohrnii, though it's earned a considerably more evocative nickname among the researchers who study it closely, the immortal jellyfish. Under most ordinary circumstances, an aging or damaged adult medusa of nearly any jellyfish species will simply die, its tissues breaking down the way any animals eventually do. But this one small, unassuming jellyfish, when stressed by injury, illness, starvation, or old age, can do something no other known animal is able to manage. It reverts. Rather than dying, its fully formed adult body begins folding back in on itself, its specialized cells actually changing type entirely, a process called transdifferentiation, essentially rewinding its own development back to the earlier polyp stage we discussed a little earlier tonight, anchoring itself back onto a hard surface and beginning its whole life cycle over again from a considerably younger, simpler stage of development. Discovered almost by accident in a research laboratory back in the 1990s, when a marine biology student noticed his samples refusing to die in the way he expected, this one small, genuinely remarkable trick has since made Turritopsis dohrnii one of the most closely studied animals in the entire field of aging research. That original discovery has a genuinely charming story behind it. The student in question had simply left a container of jellyfish unattended for longer than intended, expecting to return to a sample of dead, deteriorated animals. Instead, he found the fully grown medusae had reverted back into their earlier polyp form entirely, clinging quietly to the sides of the container as though they'd simply started their whole lives over again from scratch. That single unexpected observation has since grown into an entire dedicated field of research, one small, overlooked laboratory accident quietly reshaping how scientists think about the biological limits of aging itself. That puzzle has, in recent years, attracted growing scientific attention well beyond jellyfish biology alone, as researchers studying aging more broadly look to Turritopsis dohrnii for genuine clues about the biological mechanisms underlying cellular aging itself. Comparative genetic studies of this one small species have identified differences in how its DNA repair processes function compared to closely related jellyfish that don't share the same reversal ability, hinting that some combination of especially effective repair mechanisms and unusually flexible cellular identity may together explain a trick that, on the surface, Looks almost like something out of a fable rather than an actual, documented biological process. None of this research suggests any realistic near-term path toward human immortality. Of course, the biological distance between a small, simple jellyfish and a considerably more complex mammal remaining enormous in nearly every meaningful respect. But the careful, patient study of exactly how this one small animal manages its own remarkable trick continues to offer genuine, useful insight into the broader question of what aging actually is at a cellular level, and just how much flexibility might still be hidden inside processes we've long assumed to be fixed and irreversible. Perhaps fittingly for an animal capable of such quiet persistence, Turritopsis dohrnii has itself spread far beyond its original Mediterranean waters in recent decades, likely carried unintentionally in the ballast water of cargo ships traveling between distant ports. Small, easily overlooked populations have since established themselves in coastal waters across much of the world, a tiny, unassuming traveler quietly expanding its own range far beyond anywhere it might have reached under its own power alone, in its own small way echoing the same patient, persistent quality that makes its life cycle so remarkable in the first place. It's worth being clear about exactly what that immortality does and doesn't actually mean. This jellyfish can still be eaten by a predator. It can still succumb to disease, or simply be torn apart by rough water. What it doesn't seem to do, under normal biological aging alone, is simply wear out and die of old age the way almost every other animal eventually does. Left undisturbed, in ideal conditions, an individual Turritopsis dohrnii could, in principle, continue this same cycle of aging and reverting indefinitely, a loop with no obvious natural endpoint built into it at all. That same capacity for dramatic cellular transformation echoes, in a gentler form, throughout the wider jellyfish family more broadly. Many species, our familiar moon jellyfish included, show a genuinely remarkable ability to regenerate damaged or lost body parts, regrowing torn tentacles, or even reorganizing a partially damaged bell back into a functional, symmetrical shape, sometimes reorganizing existing tissue rather than growing entirely new material from scratch, a quiet, patient kind of resilience built into an animal with no bones to break, and seemingly very little urgency about the whole business of staying exactly the same shape indefinitely. Researchers studying this broader regenerative ability have found that some jellyfish, when cut into several separate fragments under laboratory conditions, can reorganize each individual fragment into its own smaller, fully functional, if slightly reduced, jellyfish, rather than simply healing over a wound the way most other animals would. It's a genuinely striking demonstration of just how much flexibility remains built into an animal whose entire nervous system was never centralized into one single, indispensable organ in the first place. Let's drift now into a warm, shallow lagoon, sheltered by mangrove roots reaching down into calm, sun-warmed water, where something genuinely unusual rests quietly on the soft, sandy bottom below us. Mangrove lagoons like this one tend to stay noticeably calmer than open coastline, their tangled roots breaking up incoming waves before they ever reach the shallow, protected water further inside, creating exactly the kind of still, undisturbed conditions where an animal content to simply rest in one place, gathering sunlight rather than actively hunting, can thrive for years without ever needing to move very far at all. This is an upside-down jellyfish, and true to its name, it spends nearly all of its adult life resting bell down against the seafloor, tentacles reaching upward toward the sunlight filtering down from above, precisely the opposite orientation from almost every other jellyfish we've followed so far tonight. That unusual posture serves a genuinely clever purpose. Within its own tissue, this jellyfish hosts thousands of tiny photosynthetic algae, living in a close, mutually beneficial partnership remarkably similar to the one corals rely on. By resting upside down with its tentacles spread open toward the sun, the jellyfish essentially farms its own sunlight, its algal partners converting that light into sugars the jellyfish can then absorb directly, supplementing whatever it manages to catch through more ordinary means. That same partnership means an upside-down jellyfish fortunes are tied closely to the health and clarity of the shallow water it calls home, since its algal partners depend entirely on reliable sunlight reaching down through the water column. Cloudy, sediment-heavy water, of the kind increasingly common near developed coastlines, can seriously reduce how much energy this jellyfish is able to farm from its own resident algae. One more quiet example of how even an animal seemingly so simple and self-sufficient remains closely tied to the wider health of the particular patch of ocean it depends on. Let's leave that same warm, sunlit lagoon behind now, and travel instead toward considerably colder, darker water, far below where any sunlight could ever reach at all. Down here, in the deep sea's permanent darkness, an entirely different collection of jellyfish species has adapted to a world with no natural light whatsoever. Many of them produce their own soft, eerie glow instead, flashing brief pulses of blue-green bioluminescent light when disturbed, a display that can serve several different purposes depending on the exact species and situation. Sometimes that sudden flash startles an approaching predator long enough for the jellyfish to drift safely away. Other times, the light seems intended instead to attract the attention of something even larger, a kind of underwater alarm system, calling in a bigger predator that might, in turn, chase away whatever was threatening the jellyfish in the first place. Researchers exploring these deep, permanently dark waters using specialized submersibles have documented an entire hidden world of glowing jellyfish species previously unknown to science, some producing steady, continuous light, others flashing in short, rapid bursts, and still others capable of coordinating a rippling wave of light traveling the length of their own body, not unlike the rippling comb rose we noticed earlier in the comb jelly, though produced here through genuine bioluminescence, rather than simple light refraction. Some deep-sea species have taken this same strategy even further, developing tentacles, or in certain cases entire detachable body parts, that continue glowing brightly even after being shed, drifting away from the jellyfish itself as a bright, wriggling decoy, distracting a predator's attention while the rest of the animal quietly escapes into the surrounding darkness. Let's rise back up now, gradually, toward warmer, sunlit water nearer the surface, where a very different kind of jellyfish story has become increasingly common in recent decades. In certain seasons, Under the right combination of warm water, abundant nutrients, and calm currents, jellyfish populations can suddenly multiply into what researchers call a bloom, enormous, dense aggregations sometimes stretching for many kilometers, transforming what was open, clear water only days earlier into a thick, pulsing mass of drifting bodies. These blooms have become noticeably more frequent and more intense in a number of regions around the world over recent decades, a shift many scientists link to warming ocean temperatures, to nutrient runoff from coastal agriculture feeding the tiny plankton jellyfish depend on, and to the ongoing decline of natural jellyfish predators like sea turtles and certain large fish species, removed from many ecosystems faster than jellyfish populations themselves have declined in turn. In particularly severe cases, these same blooms have been known to clog the cooling water intakes of coastal power plants, tear through fishing nets far too fine to filter them out, and force the temporary closure of crowded public beaches, an increasingly visible reminder of just how sensitive these simple, ancient animals remain to the wider health of the ocean they've called home for 500 million years. Some coastal regions have responded to increasingly frequent blooms with genuinely creative solutions. Specialized boats fitted with fine mesh nets designed purely to harvest excess jellyfish from especially crowded harbors. The resulting catch, sometimes processed for the same food markets we'll discuss a little later tonight, or used instead as a natural fertilizer on nearby farmland, turning what starts as a genuine nuisance into at least some modest, practical benefit for the surrounding community. Let's return now to our original moon jellyfish, still drifting patiently through the same calm, darkening water where we first found her, and look a little more closely at just how remarkably simple her entire internal design really is. It's worth pausing, before we go any further, simply to appreciate how much this same animal has already accomplished tonight using so little in the way of specialized equipment. No brain to plan her next movement. No heart to pump blood toward tissues that need it. And yet here she remains, patiently pulsing forward through open water, sensing gravity, sensing light, defending herself, and slowly, steadily digesting whatever small meal she happened to catch earlier this same evening, all of it managed through nothing more elaborate than the simple, distributed systems we're about to look at a little more closely. There's something worth noticing in just how much this same small animal manages to accomplish, using resources so much simpler than nearly anything else swimming through the same water around her. Where a fish carries an entire skeleton, a centralized brain, gills, a heart, and kidneys, all working in careful coordination, our moon jellyfish manages an equally full, if considerably quieter, existence using barely any of that same specialized machinery at all. Where nearly every other animal you can think of relies on a whole collection of separate, specialized systems, one for digestion, another for breathing, another for circulating blood, our moon jellyfish gets by with almost none of that at all. She has a single internal cavity, called a gastrovascular cavity, that handles digestion entirely on its own, and remarkably, that same cavity has only one opening. Whatever she manages to catch enters through that one opening, gets broken down and absorbed within that same central chamber, and whatever can't be used simply exits again through that exact same opening afterward, one single doorway serving as both mouth and, eventually, the only other option available. It's a solution that would strike most other animals as impossibly inefficient, mixing the business of eating and eliminating within one single space, and yet it works perfectly well for an animal built around such simple, modest needs. There's no need for a separate, specialized exit when the entire body plan is built around such a leisurely, undemanding pace of life. No rush to keep two separate processes cleanly divided when neither one happens especially quickly or especially often in the first place. She has no lungs, no gills, nothing resembling a dedicated respiratory system at all. That same thinness, incidentally, is part of why a jellyfish's entire body plan depends so heavily on water for structural support in the first place. Remove her from the ocean entirely, and that same delicate, water-supported form collapses almost immediately into a shapeless, jelly-like puddle, unable to hold any of its own graceful structure without the surrounding water pressing evenly against every part of her body from all directions at once. It's a beautiful illustration of just how completely her entire existence depends on the medium she was built for, in a way that few land animals ever need to reckon with quite so directly. That same elegant simplicity extends into the stinging cells we discussed earlier tonight too, and it's worth pausing a little longer on exactly how remarkable those cells actually are. When a nematocyst finally fires, it does so astonishingly fast, among the quickest biological actions ever measured in any living creature, accelerating from complete stillness to forces exceeding tens of thousands of times the pull of ordinary gravity within a fraction of a single millisecond. And remarkably, this entire elaborate mechanism operates with no direct involvement from any nervous system at all. Each individual stinging cell essentially makes its own independent decision to fire, triggered purely by direct mechanical and chemical cues at the cell's own surface, an entirely self-contained, single-use weapon requiring no signal at all from anywhere else in the jellyfish's simple, distributed nervous system. Scientists studying this remarkable mechanism using high-speed cameras capable of capturing many thousands of frames each second have found the whole firing sequence complete in a matter of microseconds, faster than the blink of an eye by several orders of magnitude, faster, in fact, than almost any other biological movement yet measured across the entire animal kingdom. That such extraordinary speed comes packaged inside a cell too small to see without a microscope, built by an animal with no brain to design or coordinate it, remains one of the more genuinely humbling small wonders hidden inside this whole soft, unassuming family of creatures. Even a jellyfish still in its earliest, smallest ephora stage, freshly released from its parent polyp and barely more than a translucent, star-shaped speck drifting through open water, already carries fully functional stinging cells of its own, ready to defend itself, or capture its very first tiny meal, long before it ever grows into anything resembling the graceful, pulsing shape we've spent so much of tonight following quietly through the dark. Let's widen our view a little now, away from any single jellyfish, and toward the much larger web of ocean life that continues quietly weaving itself around every animal we've followed so far tonight. It's easy, spending so much time following one particular animal closely, to lose sight of just how deeply woven into the wider ocean it actually is. Every jellyfish we've met tonight, however simple its own body might be, exists within a much larger, constantly shifting web of relationships, feeding certain animals, sheltering others, and eventually, in its own quiet way, nourishing still more once its own brief life finally comes to its close. Few creatures depend on jellyfish quite so directly, or quite so completely, as the sea turtles we might have met on another quiet evening much like this one. Leatherback sea turtles in particular feed almost exclusively on jellyfish, following blooms across entire ocean basins, consuming enormous quantities of soft, pulsing bodies to sustain their own considerable size. Ocean sunfish, extraordinary flattened giants that can weigh close to 1,000 kilograms themselves, rely on jellyfish just as heavily, drifting slowly through open water in patient search of exactly the same soft, drifting prey. It's a genuinely striking pairing, when you consider it closely. Two of the largest animals in the entire ocean, a leatherback turtle and an ocean sunfish, both built almost entirely around consuming a food source that offers remarkably little energy per bite compared to its sheer physical size. Both species compensate by simply eating enormous quantities, a leatherback consuming a substantial fraction of its own body weight in jellyfish across a single day, a testament to just how successfully this soft, simple prey has managed to support some of the largest animals swimming through the ocean today. Jellyfish themselves are far from passive victims in this same wider web, of course. Our moon jellyfish, and most of her relatives, feed steadily on tiny drifting plankton, small fish eggs and larvae, and occasionally, when the opportunity arises, on other jellyfish entirely, a reminder that this same soft, seemingly gentle animal sits at more than one level of its own local food web simultaneously, predator and prey often within the very same patch of open water. Some jellyfish species have even developed a genuine preference for consuming other jellyfish over any other available food source, patrolling the same waters where blooms of smaller species tend to gather, feeding steadily on their softer, more vulnerable relatives whenever the opportunity arises. It's a small reminder that even within this single, ancient family of animals, the same basic pattern of eating and being eaten continues quietly playing out, one soft, translucent body preying on another, endlessly repeated across countless generations stretching back over that same 500 million years we discussed a little earlier tonight. And in a small, quietly remarkable twist, certain young fish have found a way to turn a jellyfish's own greatest defense into their own personal shelter instead. Juvenile trevally, along with several other small fish species, and even certain tiny shrimp, have developed a natural resistance to jellyfish venom, allowing them to shelter safely among a jellyfish's trailing, stinging tentacles, using that same deadly defense as a mobile, ready-made refuge from larger predators that have no such immunity themselves. This same partnership benefits both parties in its own quiet way. The sheltering young fish gain a genuinely effective, mobile refuge simply by staying close, darting in among the tentacles the instant a larger predator approaches, while the jellyfish itself may benefit from the fish helping to keep small parasites away, or occasionally scavenging tiny scraps left over from whatever the jellyfish itself has already caught and consumed. It's a relationship built on nothing more than convenient proximity and a shared, if entirely one-sided, tolerance, and yet it plays out reliably enough, across wide enough stretches of ocean, that marine biologists studying jellyfish behavior have come to consider it a genuinely important part of understanding how young fish survive their own most vulnerable early stage of life. Even in death, a jellyfish continues playing a genuinely important, if easily overlooked, role in the wider ocean around it. When a jellyfish finally dies, whether from old age, disease, or simply the end of a seasonal bloom, its body sinks slowly toward the seafloor, an event researchers have taken to calling a jelly fall. Though considerably smaller in scale than the much larger, more famous whale falls that occasionally settle onto the deep seafloor, jelly falls happen far more frequently, delivering a steady, ongoing pulse of nutrients down into deep-sea ecosystems that would otherwise receive very little organic material at all, feeding entire communities of deep-sea scavengers that have come to rely on this same quiet, recurring gift falling gently down from the sunlit water high above them. For a long time, scientists studying deep-sea nutrient cycles largely overlooked jelly falls entirely, focused instead on the more dramatic, more visually striking whale falls that occasionally happen to be documented by deep-sea cameras. More recent research, however, has suggested that because jellyfish blooms occur so much more frequently and involve such enormous total biomass once you add every individual together, jelly falls may actually deliver a comparable, or in some regions even greater, total contribution of organic material to the deep sea floor over the course of an entire year, a quiet, steady drizzle of nourishment compared to the occasional, dramatic downpour of a single whale fall. In this sense, our moon jellyfish, drifting so quietly and unassumingly through the calm water above us tonight, is already, in her own patient way, contributing to an entire ocean ecosystem that stretches from the warm, sunlit surface all the way down into the permanent darkness of the deep sea floor, whether she happens to be aware of any of it or not. It's a fitting thought to rest with for a moment, a single soft, translucent creature, entirely without ambition or awareness in any sense would recognize, nevertheless woven so thoroughly into the wider fabric of ocean life, feeding some animals, sheltering others, and eventually, in her own quiet way, nourishing an entire community of creatures she will never once encounter, resting patiently on a sea floor she herself will never actually visit while still alive. Let's turn our attention now, for a while, away from any single jellyfish, and toward the surprisingly varied ways people have come to understand, use, and even celebrate these quiet, ancient animals over the centuries. It's a genuinely broad range of human interest, when you consider it all together, stretching from careful, traditional food preparation passed down across generations, to cutting-edge modern biology laboratories, to the quiet, deliberate calm of a well-designed public aquarium exhibit. Very few animals manage to touch quite so many different corners of human life and curiosity at once, especially one so often assumed, at a passing glance, to be little more than a simple, drifting nuisance best avoided at the beach. Across parts of coastal China and Japan, certain species of jellyfish have been harvested and prepared as food for a very long time indeed, their bodies carefully processed, salted, and pressed to achieve a distinctive, delicately crunchy texture entirely unlike anything else in traditional cuisine, served thinly sliced in salads or alongside other cold dishes. Preparing jellyfish this way is a genuinely careful, patient craft, requiring exact timing and specific handling to transform something almost entirely made of water into a food that holds its own particular texture and character. The full preparation process can take several weeks from start to finish, the jellyfish repeatedly treated with a careful combination of salt and alum to gradually draw out excess moisture while preserving the delicate structure of its tissue. A slow, patient transformation not entirely unlike the jellyfish's own patient life cycle, each stage requiring its own careful span of time before the next can properly begin. That same patient tradition has, in recent years, drawn renewed interest from chefs and food researchers well beyond its original coastal origins, curious about jellyfish as a genuinely sustainable food source, abundant, fast-growing, and, in many regions, increasingly overpopulated relative to the rest of the local ecosystem. Harvesting jellyfish for food, some researchers have suggested, may even help offset the same bloom problems we discussed a little earlier tonight, turning what starts as an ecological imbalance into a genuinely useful, renewable resource, provided harvesting remains carefully managed rather than allowed to spiral into its own separate problem entirely. Elsewhere, an entirely different kind of contribution to human knowledge has come from a considerably smaller, more delicate species called the crystal jellyfish. Within its own translucent tissue, this jellyfish naturally produces a remarkable glowing compound called green fluorescent protein, or GFP, originally studied simply out of curiosity about how and why this particular jellyfish glows the faint green it does under certain kinds of light. That same protein has since become one of the single most important tools in all of modern biological research, used by scientists worldwide as a kind of living tag, attached to specific genes to make their activity visible and traceable directly under a microscope. The three researchers responsible for discovering and developing this remarkable tool were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2008, a quiet, glowing jellyfish from ordinary coastal water having, almost by accident, reshaped an entire field of modern science. Today, that same glowing protein, or various engineered versions of it, appears in laboratories on every continent, used to trace how cancer spreads through living tissue, to watch nerve cells develop in real time, to track the precise moment a particular gene switches on inside a living organism. It's a genuinely remarkable thought to sit with for a moment, that so much of modern biology's ability to actually see its own subject matter in action traces back to one small, quietly glowing jellyfish drifting through ordinary coastal water, studied initially for no reason beyond simple scientific curiosity about why it happened to glow at all. Unlike the sea turtle we might have followed on another night much like this one, jellyfish haven't accumulated quite the same depth of ancient, widespread mythology across human cultures, their soft, fleeting bodies perhaps less suited to the kind of enduring, symbolic weight a slow, armored, long-lived tortoise naturally invites. Even so, coastal communities in many parts of the world have long developed their own particular folk knowledge around jellyfish, careful local wisdom about which seasons bring dangerous blooms, which specific stings call for vinegar and which call instead for careful, hot water treatment. Knowledge passed down patiently, generation after generation, among people whose daily lives depend on understanding the water they live and work beside. Some traditional coastal cultures did develop their own smaller, more localized stories around jellyfish even without the same grand cosmological role a turtle might occupy, treating an unusually large seasonal bloom as an omen worth paying attention to, or associating certain species with particular local spirits or deities tied closely to the sea's own changing moods. These smaller, more localized traditions rarely traveled far beyond their own coastline, unlike the widely shared world turtle story we might have encountered on another evening, but they represent their own genuine, patient accumulation of practical, hard-won knowledge about a creature that has always demanded careful respect rather than casual dismissal. In more recent decades, jellyfish have found an entirely new kind of public appreciation too, inside modern public aquariums specifically designed around their unusual, delicate needs. Standard rectangular fish tanks, it turns out, are a genuinely poor fit for jellyfish, their soft, fragile bodies easily damaged by pump intakes or trapped in sharp interior corners. Aquarium designers eventually developed a specialized circular tank called a chrysal, using a gentle, continuous circular current to keep delicate jellyfish suspended safely in open water, drifting endlessly in a slow, steady loop, without ever coming close enough to a hard edge or corner to risk any real injury. Watching a well-designed chrysal tank in action has become, for many visitors, one of the more genuinely calming experiences a modern aquarium has to offer, an entire enclosure built purely around gentle, continuous motion, dozens of translucent bells pulsing softly in slow, hypnotic unison, lit carefully from behind to highlight their own natural, glowing translucence. It's not entirely surprising that this same quiet, drifting rhythm, engineered carefully by aquarium designers purely to keep these delicate animals safe and healthy, has also become something many people find themselves returning to simply for the calm, unhurried feeling it offers. Let's drift now, gently, back towards something considerably older than any aquarium, any harvest, any piece of folk wisdom passed down between coastal generations, back toward the very deep well of time this whole family of animals first emerged from. It's a genuinely humbling shift in perspective to make, moving from chrysal tanks and Nobel Prize laboratories back to a time before nearly anything else we might recognize existed at all. No forests. No insects. No fish with bones, or bones of any kind anywhere in the ocean. Just water, and within it, some of the very earliest true animals this planet had yet produced, our own jellyfish's distant, soft-bodied ancestors quietly among them. Jellyfish, and their wider family of relatives, are widely considered among the very oldest identifiable animal groups preserved anywhere in the fossil record, with soft-bodied impressions resembling jellyfish appearing in rock formations dating back more than 500 million years, into a period of Earth's history called the Ediacaran, long before the far more familiar Cambrian explosion produced the first hard-shelled, easily fossilized animals most people picture when they imagine ancient sea life. That fossil record remains genuinely difficult and patchy to interpret with total confidence, since a body made almost entirely of soft, delicate tissue rarely preserves well at all, usually breaking down completely long before it has any real chance of becoming a lasting impression in stone. Every confirmed jellyfish fossil we do have represents a genuinely rare stroke of good fortune, an animal caught at exactly the right moment, buried quickly enough in exactly the right kind of fine sediment, undisturbed for hundreds of millions of years afterward, to leave behind even a faint trace of its own soft, otherwise perishable body. Paleontologists studying these rare fossil impressions have had to develop unusually careful, specialized techniques simply to confirm that a given faint circular impression in ancient rock genuinely represents a jellyfish, rather than some other kind of trace left behind by an entirely different process entirely, a bubble of escaping gas, a mineral deposit, or the impression of some other soft-bodied creature since lost to time. It's painstaking, careful work, appropriately enough, for an animal whose entire nature seems to reward exactly that same kind of patience. Jellyfish and their cnidarian relatives are also notable for representing one of the very earliest points in animal history where truly organized tissue first appears at all, a distinct step up in complexity from the even simpler sponges that came before them. Where a sponge has no true nervous system and no organized muscle tissue whatsoever, a jellyfish's distributed nerve net and coordinated muscular contractions represent a genuinely significant evolutionary milestone, one of the very first appearances of an animal actually capable of sensing its surroundings and responding with deliberate, coordinated movement. That milestone matters more than it might first appear, since nearly every animal alive today, however complex, still relies on some version of the same basic innovation a jellyfish's ancestors first developed: specialized nerve cells capable of sensing a stimulus and coordinating some kind of response. Our own elaborate brains, and the brains of every other animal with one, represent an enormously more complex, centralized version of exactly the same basic idea a jellyfish's simple, distributed nerve net first pioneered, all those hundreds of millions of years ago, long before anything resembling a brain had ever been assembled at all. Their whole body is also built around a considerably older, and in some ways simpler, kind of symmetry than the one most other animals rely on. Where the vast majority of animals alive today, ourselves included, are built around bilateral symmetry, a clear left side mirroring a clear right side around one central axis, our moon jellyfish instead follows radial symmetry, her whole body organized evenly around a single central point, much like the spokes of a wheel, with no obvious front, back, left, or right at all in the way we might understand those terms ourselves. That radial body plan carries genuine practical advantages for an animal drifting through open water with no fixed direction of travel. A fish, built around bilateral symmetry, benefits enormously from a clear front end housing its eyes and mouth, streamlined for moving efficiently in one particular direction. A jellyfish, by contrast, may drift equally well in any direction the current happens to carry it, and its radial symmetry means every part of its bell and its ring of tentacles remains equally ready to sense danger, or catch a passing meal, regardless of which way it happens to be facing at any given moment. It's worth pausing here for a moment, simply to notice how strange and remarkable it really is that this same basic, radiating body plan, one of the very oldest solutions to being a living, moving animal at all, is still drifting through the exact same oceans today, entirely unbothered by everything else that has changed around it across that same immense stretch of time. There's one more kind of jellyfish story worth sharing before we let this long night finish turning toward morning, not about any single animal this time, but about the patient, careful attention researchers have spent recent decades building around these ancient, deceptively simple creatures. That attention takes a genuinely wide range of forms, from marine biologists spending entire careers studying a single small lagoon population, to laboratory researchers coaxing crystal jellyfish to reveal the secrets of their own quiet glow, to coastal lifeguards developing careful, practical knowledge about exactly which sting calls for which treatment. None of it looks especially dramatic from the outside, and yet, taken together across enough decades, it has slowly transformed how thoroughly we understand an entire family of animals once dismissed by many as simple, mindless drifters with very little worth studying closely at all. Modern satellite tags and underwater tracking systems, considerably more advanced than anything available even 20 years ago, have allowed scientists to follow jellyfish blooms across entire ocean basins in a level of detail once entirely impossible, tracing exactly how warming water, shifting currents, and changing nutrient levels combine to trigger a bloom in one particular season, in one particular stretch of coastline, while leaving a seemingly similar stretch of water only a short distance away almost entirely undisturbed. Some of this same tracking work has relied on genuinely creative engineering, tiny sensors light enough to attach even to a soft-bodied jellyfish without disrupting its normal swimming behavior, transmitting depth, temperature, and location data back to researchers monitoring from research vessels or, increasingly, from ordinary laptops on shore. It's a considerable technical challenge, building equipment robust enough to survive weeks or months in open ocean conditions, yet gentle and light enough not to harm an animal with no hard shell or skeleton to attach anything to in the first place. That same research has, in turn, opened up a genuinely lively, ongoing scientific debate. Some researchers argue jellyfish blooms really have become measurably more frequent and more severe across many parts of the world's oceans in recent decades, closely tied to warming water and the decline of natural predators. Others point out that jellyfish blooms have likely always been part of the ocean's natural rhythm, and that improved monitoring, more coastal development, and simply more people now living and working near the shore may explain at least part of why blooms seem to be reported so much more often than they once were. It's a genuinely open question, still being carefully worked through, one piece of patient data at a time. There's a particular kind of comfort worth sitting with, in that same quiet truth, as this long night finally draws to its close. So much of what we spend our own lives worrying over, planning for, trying to control or perfect, has very little to do with what actually allows a life to continue, patiently, from one day into the next. This small, brainless, heartless creature has managed exactly that, for longer than almost anything else alive today, simply by continuing to do the one, simple thing its whole body was built for, again and again, without complaint, without hurry, and without ever once needing to understand any of it. The sky continues to lighten now, gently, the way it always eventually does. There's nothing more you need to do tonight. No further distance left to travel. Just rest here a while longer, in this same slow, drifting quiet that has carried us the whole way through, and let the morning arrive in its own unhurried time. Thank you for spending this time here, in the quiet, gentle company of these remarkable ancient animals. May the same soft, unhurried rhythm we've spent 2 hours describing settle now, just as gently, into your own rest too.